Ladies and gentlemen, this is the ABCs of ESG. Please welcome entrepreneur and author of Woke Inc., Vivek Ramaswamy.
Thank you. So I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to talk to you for the next 15 minutes about what I see as the single greatest threat to both capitalism and democracy in the United States, and that is the rise of stakeholder capitalism and the ESG movement. And what this represents is a new vehicle for the party in power to do through the back door what government could not get done through the front door under the Constitution. Now, many of you may remember Milton Friedman, who 40 years ago in the Ronald Reagan era worried about the rise of stakeholder capitalism in his era. It wasn't called ESG back then, but it was the same idea. He worried about it because he thought it was going to lead companies to be less effective at making products and produce less profits for their shareholders. And I'll tell you what, he was right about that, and I agree with him. But I'm worried about something else. I worry that the rise of stakeholder capitalism and ESG actually drains the lifeblood out of our democracy, taking these political questions of how or whether you address climate change, how or whether to address supposed systemic racism in the private sector, to take that from being a political question and instead to give the power to CEOs and executives and investors to settle those questions through force, using your money to do it. And what's happening today, I think, is the biggest financial fraud and ideological fraud of the 21st century, where the largest asset managers in the world, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, three firms that control $22 trillion, that is more than the GDP of the United States, are using your money, our money, to advocate for political and social agendas in corporate America's boardrooms that most of us actually disagree with. That is a fiduciary breach. It is the defining scam of the 21st century. It is the defining not just financial fraud, but ideological fraud of the 21st century, using the money of everyday citizens to advocate for values in corporate America's boardrooms that most of those everyday citizens actually disagree with. That is the problem. Thank you. Now, there's a question of where all of this came from. I think that in order to understand a cancer they teach you in medicine, and my career was in biotech before I got into solving these problems, they say you need to look at the root cause of that cancer. One of the root causes of this cancer, a lot of people don't realize, started with the 2008 financial crisis, okay? I know something about this because I lived the 2008 financial crisis. I got my first job in New York City in the fall of 2007 at a hedge fund. I had a front row seat. And what happened on the back of the 2008 financial crisis is that big business went from being the heroes to becoming the bad guys. And what the old left wanted to do was to then take money from those wealthy banks and corporations and redistribute it to poor people to help poor people. That was what the old left had to say, agree or not. But right around that time, there was the birth of a new progressive wing of the left that said, actually, the real problem in this country wasn't addressing poverty. It wasn't just addressing economic injustice, no. It was also addressing racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry and the racially disparate impact of climate change. And you know what happened? Occupy Wall Street was knocking on Wall Street's doorstep, but the new left actually gave them a lifeline. This was the opportunity of a generation for Wall Street and big business in this country to say that, you know what? We don't like Occupy Wall Street in that wealth redistribution stuff. But what we can do is we can get on board with your climate change agenda. We can get on board with your racial equity agenda, as long as the new left commits to look the other way when it comes to leaving our corporate power structure intact. So that was the story of how a bunch of neo-progressive millennials got in bed with a bunch of bankers on Wall Street. Together they birthed woke capitalism, and they used that to put Occupy Wall Street up for adoption. And it worked so well, they said, hey, don't talk about systemic financial risk, we'll talk about systemic racism all you want. That worked so well that their friends in Silicon Valley got in on the act, where again, Silicon Valley recognized that the old threat to their monopoly power used to come from the left. It was the left that wanted to break up big tech before the right did, but what they recognized was that, you know what? We can use our power, our monopoly power, to decide what can and can't get discussed on the internet, to censor the ideas that the left did not like. But they did not do it for free. They effectively demanded that the new left look the other way when it came to leaving their monopoly power intact. You see, that is the story of this arranged marriage between big government and big business. That was far more powerful than either one alone. It was not an arranged marriage of love. It was more like mutual prostitution. And the net result of that act was the birth of this new ESG industrial complex that is far more powerful than what our founding fathers envisioned 250 years ago. It is far more powerful than what Thomas Hobbes envisioned 400 years ago. It is a new force in American life that has duped both liberals and conservatives into submission. Liberals into submission because they used to be skeptical of corporate power. Now they say if we can get the corporations to advance our agendas, we'll fall in love with them. But even many classical Republicans are duped into submission because they say the free market can do no wrong, without realizing that that free market does not exist today, and both sides are duped by the rise of this new monster. Now, it gets even one step worse when China showed up on the scene a few years ago and decided that they can actually get in on the game, turn the bilateral marriage into a three-party affair, where they said that, you know what, we can get these companies that apply these ESG mandates in the West, limitations on what your emissions are if you're an energy company, limitations on the people you can hire based on racial and sexual orientation-driven quota systems in the boardrooms of companies, and criticize social injustice in the US. We can do that to Disney and Nike and Airbnb and BlackRock, which is the most powerful of them all. We can do that to the Western companies without actually having them apply those same standards in China, where there are actual human rights atrocities, where there are over 1 million religious minorities locked up in concentration camps, subject to forced sterilization, communist indoctrination, and worse, and say that, you know, the same companies that regularly criticize the United States, we can actually get them to stay silent when it comes to actual injustices here in China, if we ultimately just say that you can't enter the Chinese market if you actually offer a criticism of the CCP. And so what they have managed to do is to take not just this ESG industrial complex here in the West, but to take it and accomplish a geopolitical advantage that none of us envisioned, to be able to weaken the United States from within by getting global companies to relentlessly criticize the United States, relentlessly applying ESG and other emissions cap standards to oil companies here at home, without actually applying those same standards to companies like PetroChina on the other side of the globe. And that's the story of how China has actually recognized that they can use this to their advantage, eroding the greatest geopolitical asset of all in the United States. That is not our nuclear arsenal. It is our moral standing on the global stage. So that's the problem. Thank you. The question is, how do we solve that problem today? I think it's going to require both political solutions and market solutions. On the political side, it's going to require a conservative movement to wake up to the fact that the biggest threat to liberty and prosperity in our country today is not just big government. That is only half the story. It is a new hybrid between big government and big business that is far more powerful than either one alone. If you're a technology company, maybe back in 1980 you were free to do what you want and allow somebody to post something on your website and you're free to decide if you want to take it down. But in the year 2022, when the government is working hand in glove with the technology company to tell them what they have to take down or what they can't take down, and they're coordinating to do it, If it's state action in disguise, then the Constitution still applies. Companies that work with the government to censor content on the internet should be subject to the Constitution and the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. We need new dogmas to wake up to the fact that, you know what? Maybe we believe the free market could have worked if it were a free market, but the free market cannot fix what it is not free to fix when it comes to viewpoint-based discrimination in the private sector. You know, you can't fire somebody for being black or gay or Muslim or white or Christian or Jewish or whatever. But I ask the question, then why should you be free to also fire somebody for being an outspoken conservative or an outspoken liberal for that matter? We should make political belief a protected class right up there next to race, sex, sexual orientation, religion, and national origin in the civil rights statutes. And you know what? The old 1980s conservative wisdom would have said that you don't want to impose another constraint on what a business can and can't do, that the free market should solve this. I say that makes a lot of sense if you actually apply that standard even-handedly. If you actually say that we don't have protected classes at all, and you let the market solve the problem. But you cannot have it both ways, where you do not trust the market to police discrimination based on race or sex or sexual orientation or religion or national origin, but somehow we're going to trust the market to police discrimination on behalf of viewpoints. You can't have it both ways. At the end of the day, you have to apply the standards even-handedly. That's what the new Republican movement actually needs to wake up to, reviving the shared ideals of this country, recognizing that America is not a country that forces you to choose between the First Amendment and expressing yourself freely in the private sector and in the public sector and putting food on the dinner table. Choosing between the First Amendment and the American dream. We are the quintessential nation where you get to enjoy both of those things at once, and we need a new conservative movement to wake up to that reality, wake up the ideals that define what it means to be American. Now, I'm going to confess to you that I am not optimistic that that's going to happen through our political process. I can tell you all the reasons why. Wrote a pair of books. The second one's coming out this year. The first one, Woke Inc., many of you may have read. At the end of the day, the blueprint is clear for what policymakers can do. I don't think they're going to be in a position to actually do it. But here's the good news. I do believe that we will, sooner than we see those political solutions, see solutions delivered through the market itself. New businesses born to serve the 100 million, 150 million, 200 million plus Americans who are sick and tired of politics infecting the boardroom. And that is why I decided I'm not doing politics. I'm done just writing books. I started a new business this year, Strive Asset Management. We are competing head-on versus BlackRock, undoing the damage that the ESG sector that the ESG movement has done to one sector at a time. And I'm pleased to say, keep your eyes open next week, where we start with our first target, focusing on the sector that has been most damaged by this movement. That is the U.S. energy sector, where the largest investment firms in the world have told America's oil and gas companies to stop drilling, to stop producing, to stop fracking, to address someone else's political agenda. Well, you know what I say? We need a new movement of shareholders in this country, all of you, the citizens and owners of capital, to deliver a message to the boardrooms of America's energy companies that, you know what, America, it is time to drill again. It is time to frack again. It is time to produce more energy if that's what makes you most successful. Revive American energy using shareholder power to do it, to bring a different voice using your own dollars to the boardroom that someone else is abusing today. Channel that in a different way to deliver that message and save America's energy industry. And you know what I love about starting with the energy industry? Is that most of the people who work there already want to do it. They're just waiting for new shareholders to tell them to do it. American energy companies are not like Twitter. And as much as I love Elon, at the end of the day, if there's 16,000 employees who don't want to do the thing that you actually want them to do as a shareholder, it's going to be really hard to drive change. But if you start with a sector in which the employees who work there, who chose to dedicate their waking hours to producing American energy, they're not doing it because they think being an oil company is evil or fracking for natural gas is evil. They're doing it because they know that's what lifts us all up as a country. And if a new shareholder mandate to the energy sector tells them that this is how you create value and this is how you ultimately shore up American energy security again, then that gives us a path that we can take to every other sector one at a time, building a movement of American citizens as shareholders representing their voices in the boardrooms again. So I will encourage you, starting next week, to stay tuned to this. It's the first place I'm talking about it. This is going to be the beginning of what I see as not the Great Reset, as you may hear in Davos, but the beginning of the great uprising of the everyday citizen that says no to the demands of the Great Reset, that at the end of the day, it is our money, our voice, our vote that will restore the shared ideals that defined this country in 1776. May 2022 revive those ideals of 1776, and I invite every one of you to join that movement and be a part of it. Thank you. God bless our great country, and I'll be seeing more of you guys soon. Thank you.